Welcome back guys, another NVM vlog, and in this vlog we'll be stage 1 tuning the M2 competition. So as well as covering tuning on the M2 competition today, we're actually going to discuss the differences between the M2 comp and the M4 competition. And the reason being, obviously they run the same engine, the S55, head block and sump, and the ancillaries are very similar. Obviously you can probably tell it's got carbon fibre strut brace, it's got the twin airbox, it's got the charge cooler. And if you haven't already seen our last video, we covered the stock dyno pull on this as well, and it made about 409 brake horsepower, which is what they target from factory. So what we're going to do today is back up the ECU, go through the software, see what the changes are, have a look underneath and discuss the differences in exhaust system and what differences they make as well to the end result. Underneath, very similar to the M2 original and the M4. I mean, you've still got the cooling at the front, the same as the M4. The under trays are very similar to the M2. The downpipe is exactly the same as the M4, although they have a back pressure pipe coming off it to sense the back pressure when the GPF needs regeneration. So further back to that, we've got these two huge petrol particle filters, and these petrol particle filters are what causes a lot of the restriction. So within the ECU, they've taken into account these GPFs and reduced some power at the top end, and also increased temperature allowed on the turbo side. Further behind that, we've got a resonator, and at the back we've got an M4 style rear exhaust system. The actual exhaust flap control is very similar to the M4, although it's a lot quieter because the valve control per gear has been reduced. We'll take a hard look at the software and see what the differences are to reduce that kind of 15 to 20 horsepower loss compared to an M4. So guys, with the full backup of the ECU, we can actually see quite obviously as to where BMW has restricted the power on the M2 competition, and this is probably obviously down to it not making more power than an M4 for sale reasons, but turbo efficiency has been reduced, load has been reduced, and optimal engine torque has been descaled as well, which is what we see on various different variants of vehicles, but not of the same engine variant. So it's quite interesting to see that within the calibration. So what I'm going to do now is take a few elements out of the M4 competition ECU structure, place it in the M2 to show you guys the difference as to where the restrictions were, and hopefully on the dyno you'll see the difference to the load, torque, ignition and fueling within the ECU. So guys, as you've probably seen in the last vlog, the car made 409 horsepower, 570 newton meters of torque on 99 run fuel. We actually went through the data log of the car compared to an M4, and we've actually overlaid it on the dyno as well, so you can probably see that's an M4 competition, 444 brake horsepower it made and 570 newton meters of torque. What we expect to see is the M2 competition power line take up basically, and not an increase here, because the difference in the software, as you've probably seen, is all at the top end beyond 5,500 RPM. So we're actually going to run it on the dyno now. We've unlocked the ECU and we've flashed over the calibration from the M4. So we'll run it in the dyno and see what it makes. as you guys can see on the graph, exactly what it should be. 444 brake horsepower, 570 newton meters of torque. So the power is exactly where it is on the M4, and it's replicated exactly what the M4 does. So we know exactly where the limitations are on the M2. What we're going to do now is build a calibration for a stage 1, so that's increased torque, mid-range, low down. We actually make a difference to the overrun burr bulbs, and we actually control the exhaust flaps as well. There's quite a few things that we do on stage 1 that we'll do as we do with the M4 to this M2, but we're just going to build it up based upon all the settings of the M4, so it will drive a lot better than the M2 comp does with a typical off-the-shelf map. So as you guys seen on the dyno, the calibration itself from the M4 does make a difference, and that brings power up to where the S55 normally is. Looking at the data log, obviously the original data log, we did have power tailing off at the end, ignition timing was increasing, so it made a nice flat torque curve and power curve. And obviously with the new M4 settings, it's making a lot more power and a lot more torque at the top end. We make the car actually run slightly richer than we normally do because it's a GPF vehicle. But yeah, we'll see what results we can get today with a few calibrations. So guys, final results today, 515 horsepower and 645 newton meters of torque. The power graph itself is nice and smooth with a smooth torque graph as well. We've brought in the boost as linear as possible, and the reason for that is because we want it as tractable as possible basically. There's no point having 645 newton meters at 2000 RPM, so we've brought it in a bit later at about 5000 RPM to make it usable. We will be doing 100 to 200s and obviously 0 to 60s and quarter miles in a stage 1 variant, so you guys know how quick it is in real terms rather than just on the power graph. But there's a lot more to be had with this vehicle. Stage 1, no hardware changes, so all we've done is put 99 RON fuel in there. For stage 2, however, we need downpipe decats, air filters and a GPF delete, and that will allow us to basically utilize all of the turbocharger, so we can max out the turbocharger and see what it produces. Obviously if you've watched our other videos, you know what we get out of the S55, M3 and M4, but on this S55 we might be doing water meth injections just to max out the turbochargers before we go to hybrids. So one of the key points about mapping, especially stage 1 with stock hardware, is the data log. Collate as much data on the dyno and also on the road. And the reason why we collate on the road is because that's where you're going to be driving most of the time. 100 to 200s are key as well. So the modes are still the same, so comfort is still comfortable, sport is sporty, and sport plus still utilise it. What we have done as well, we've transferred over a bit of data from the M4 in terms of rear diff settings, so the ECU sends a bit more data to the rear diff to constantly keep a bit more grip basically to control the actual amount of slip with the DSC off more so than in any mode. So when we tested this M2 completely stock, we did 100 to 200 in 10.5 seconds. We've just done 2 back-to-back 100 to 200s, and one's at 7.25 and the other one's 7.27. So a very consistent result. So boost targeting, looking at the data log, seems fine. Race get duty cycle seems fine, and all round everything on drive, part throttle, seems okay as well. So a nice 3-second gain, 100 to 200s, and about 110 brake horsepower gain and 100 newton meters straight away. So all in all, a great result for stage 1 on the M2 competition. We can obviously dial in a bit more timing and a bit more boost and reduce this, but we're going to leave this as it is before we move on to stage 2 tuning. So thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Welcome back, guys, another Living Life Fast video. Get the strap.